Using free speech to free minds. It's the David Knight Show.
It's Friday, October the 18th, 2019. I'm David Knight, your host. We have a travel advisory for anybody who is traveling to Norway. Stay out of the showers. They're telling everybody to pee in the shower to save water. I don't know. I wonder, here in the U.S., our toilets only work for number one because of federal mandates. Do they have the same problem in Norway? I don't know. We've had some of the people are shaking their heads at this. They say, well, why not also poop in the shower? Save even more money. So just stay out of the shower if you're going to Norway. Folks, we're going to take a look at what they are hiding today. We had the Trump rally in Dallas yesterday. We're going to talk about that, what President Trump had to say. And, of course, the strange comments by many people, not just Joe Biden, but we've also had Twitter, veiled threats from Tom Arnold. Oh, well, JFK had a lot of supporters in Dallas, too, before it happened. The comments by Nancy Pelosi, when you look at the comments by Nancy Pelosi, maybe there was something more than just a gaffe by Joe Biden. Maybe this is a veiled threat. We got this bullet necklace, and it's the color orange, which is for gun violence. Yeah, orange man bad. Get the message? So we're going to show you what Alex did yesterday and made the top of Drudge going to Dallas saying, look, we understand what you're doing. Knock it off. And we're going to talk about the pushback again that is still continuing with Syria. But, folks, there's something else that they don't want you to see. Last night, there was, as I've been saying for the longest time, the real threat to this country is not in Syria. We're the ones who created the Syrian problem. And quite frankly, we're the ones who created the violence in Mexico. But the violence in Mexico with our war on drugs, actually it's not our war on drugs, it's the United Nations war on drugs. They created it. They created the schedules. They put the drugs into the various schedules. 10 years, 1961, before Richard Nixon in 1971, as I said, put his name on the paper and turned in his homework and called it his war on drugs. But, of course, that has created the drug cartels. It has created the drug violence, the war, the literal war that is going on. And it literally broke out into a war yesterday at the border. We've got footage of that as they were trying to capture El Chapo's son. They actually just kind of stumbled on him. They started going by, and I guess El Chapo's son, other people thought they were going to be arrested. And so they started firing at these guys. They went in and they got El Chapo's son, and then a major, major war broke out. It's so bad, as a matter of fact, that the people, as they're talking about the new Terminator movie that's going to be released on November the 1st, they said, well, yeah, we had some Mexican scenes there, but it's too violent in Mexico to film. Now, I have to ask you, why are we not concerned about our border? Why is it that Mitt Romney and the Democrats and Lindsey Graham are so concerned about Syria and the Kurds, but they don't give a damn about Americans or Mexicans? It's our war on drugs that's created this kind of violence and continues to fuel it in Mexico. And they're doing nothing to keep it from coming across the border. So what else are they hiding? We look at what is happening here, and we've got the pushback by the Trump administration against any encryption. They're trying to give immunity to the social media companies and to Google internet companies saying, with its Section 230, they're not held liable for this stuff because they're not publishers, even when they say they are publishers, even when they say they are the public square and so forth. They say, well, we can still censor. So they have the ability to censor. They have immunity for all this, and they're putting it into trade deals, trying to push this out internationally. And you look at this, and you look at the surveillance of the border. We're going to talk about what that really implies. We've had a war on drugs for the longest time, and that is along with the war on terror and now the war at the border. That's real regime change directed at our Constitution. It's Friday, October the 18th, year of our Lord 2019. I'm David Knight, your host. Yesterday, I talked about the bad consequences of our war on drugs, how we have locked up more people than even the Chinese communists. And that's not just in terms of a percentage, it's in terms of absolute numbers, even though their population is much higher than ours. But it has destroyed and corrupted our justice system, our police. It has really overthrown our Constitution and due process. And I gave a couple of examples of it yesterday. I said, look at these cases. You got just a couple of months ago, we had a guy who was arrested. They thought that he had meth, and he didn't have meth. It was at the airport. It was honey. Another guy was held earlier in the year for, they said it was cocaine. Instead, it was powdered milk. He was a homeless guy. He'd gotten the powdered milk, was given to him at a center. He's riding his bicycle down the street. Cops pull up and turn the lights on. He keeps riding. I would imagine, if I was on a bicycle, I'd keep riding. I would never imagine that I was being pulled over by the police if I was on a bicycle. He said, well, he tried to run away from us. He's going to pull an OJ when he's on a bicycle? Come on. Let's get real. Oh, he went a full 3 blocks before he pulled over. And then we went through his backpack, and we found this cocaine here, and we tested it. And so they put him in jail. He spent a couple of months in. Actually, he pled guilty because it was such a hellhole there in that county jail in Oklahoma City. It's like, well, I'm homeless anyway. I might as well just go to the federal penitentiary. It won't be a hard time like this. I've got to get out of here. A lot of people have died in that facility. And then finally somebody did a test and said, it's just powdered milk. And the judge is letting him take back that guilty plea. The guy with the honey that they identified as meth, he was in jail for many months, even though the field test, it all began because the dogs alerted to the honey. Oh, well, the dog said so. The officer canine here says so. We're going to lock this guy up. And then they did a test within a couple of days. But because the guy had a green card, they said, well, he's got this felony charge against him, and the test says that it's honey, it's not meth. But we're going to have to keep him here because if we let him go, the ICE people will deport him. It's like, what? So they kept him there for about 3 months before they finally let him go. And Sean, Sean's on our crew here. You know somebody that this happened to right here in Houston, don't you? A guy that was arrested falsely for meth. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I had a friend in high school that he was pulled over a couple years ago. They had pulled him over for making a right turn without a blinker, and whenever they pulled him over, they smelled
fluid.
Yeah, they smelled a little bit of weed on him, and they ended up finding just like a roach of it. But they searched his car and they found something, and he didn't even know what it was actually. But it ended up to be kitty litter that his dad had put in there. I guess it supposedly defogs the front windshield. But yeah, and they supposedly did 2 field tests that turned out to be meth, and they arrested him, and he went to jail, and he got out on a bond for like $50,000.
Wow!
And he went to court, and they did another test there, and it ended up just to be kitty litter, and there was already
a big event. It was a big event for the media. I mean, this was back in January 2017.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of headlines that were kind of just making his name look real bad.
Well, they thought they had Heisenberg.
Right.
Or at least Jesse Pinkman.
Yeah.
And they told the news media, and the news media ran with it. I mean, it's absolutely amazing.
Right.
2 field tests yielded positive results. They said they thought they had the biggest bus in Harris County. That's where Houston is.
Yeah.
This was the bust of the year for them, they told Eyewitness News. It may have kept our children and their loved ones free from being introduced to drugs or to kitty litter and socks.
Right. Yeah, right.
So, word of caution. I mean, don't, start out the program. You don't use the toilets in Norway. People are going to be peeing in the shower, so stay out of the showers in Norway and stay out of Houston. Because if you've got something to defog your window, you put kitty litter in a sock to keep your windows from fogging up, you just may be going to jail for a very long time. And he got out. He said, your friend said, I'd like an apology. He said it's caused him to lose work, not to mention the embarrassment, I guess, embarrassment as far as meth as well as having kitty litter in a sock. He says, I was wrongly accused, and I'm going to do everything in my power with my family's backing to clear my name. And I'm joking about the kitty litter stuff. But, folks, the war on drugs is no joke. It should be a joke. And we should repeal it. It's a bad joke on us constitutionally because there is no authority. As I said many times, I'll say it again, we had to have a constitutional amendment to prohibit alcohol. Why? because it was clear in the Constitution with the 9th and 10th Amendment that unless the government has the authority directly granted to them, they have no authority to prohibit anything. So there's no authority for the FDA as well as the DEA. But now everything is prohibited unless expressly permitted. See, that's how they've turned the Constitution upside down and inverted it. So you have the 18th and the 21st Amendment that first prohibited alcohol and then made it legal again. But then when they decided they wanted to go after marijuana and everything else, they just started doing it. Well, we don't care about the Constitution anymore, right? And that's why when I say when we look at the war on drugs, it's really about regime change, isn't it? We talk about regime change all the time in Syria. And yet the real regime change, and what we really have to worry about here, is not just one president like President Trump and a coup against him, a coup against the election, perhaps even the veiled, not so thinly veiled assassination threats against him. But we have to be concerned about the coup that has already taken place against our Constitution. It began with the war on drugs. It accelerated with 9/11 and the war on terror. And now we have, with both of those being added to the immigration issue at the border, we now have both the concern about terrorists coming across the border, as well as the violence and the drugs coming across the border. And yet, isn't it surprising that they don't monitor the border? Is it really surprising? I mean, when we look at this and you look at all the surveillance that they have here, I kind of find it's not really all that surprising when we look at this. Let's play video clip number 4. This is a report from CBS talking about what happened yesterday in Mexico as they tried to capture El Chapo's son in the Sinaloa state in Mexico, just across the border from the U.S. Video clip 4.
Past few moments, we have stunning new developments in this story. First, authorities arrested one of El Chapo's sons, as you reported, and then, after hours of out-of-control violence after the arrest, there are several reports tonight that El Chapo's son has been set free. Now, according to Reuters...
Okay, what happened to these guys? I think they lost it. There we go. All right, these are clips off of social media that they grabbed.
Videos posted on social media tonight from Culiacan show a city that looks and sounds like a war zone. Cell phone video shows what appears to be burning vehicles and residents wandering the streets.
Look at that.
City plunged
That's not Syria. That's not a gun show in Kentucky either. That's the real thing.
One of the sons of notorious drug kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, who is currently in the Supermax prison in Colorado. Ovidio was hiding out in Culiacan, which is home to the infamous Sinaloa cartel. The Associated Press reports Mexican National Guard members were patrolling in Culiacan when they were fired on from a house. Security forces returned fire and then raided the complex you see here, capturing Guzman. The arrest was followed by hours of terrifying violence, and in a bombshell development tonight, the Washington Post is reporting Ovidio was set free because authorities could not contain the cartel's uprising. Media
All right, we got to take a break. But do you hear that? They kind of stumbled across him. They had a gunfight. They captured him, and then it got so intense they had to let him go in order to... They gave up. The cartel won. This is a war that is going on right across our border. But we cannot use the military to seal off the border. We'll be right back. Stay with us. You know, the U.S. is involved in every single conflict in the world, except really what's going on with the war on drugs in Mexico and coming across the border. Yeah, there's the DEA is down there mixing stuff up. But look, we can't use the military to put an end to it, right? We can't use the military to seal off our border from the kind of violence that we're seeing there. And nobody in Congress is talking about it. No senators, nobody in the House. Of course, in the House, it's only just about impeachment. That's all they care about. Nothing else, just impeachment. But, of course, you have a resolution that they were able to pass to condemn President Trump for the mere idea of getting out of one of our many foreign wars. Obama, the first president to be at war his entire 8 years. And it's not just one war. It's multiple wars, none of which were declared. Oh, they have a blanket authorization, they say. The authorization for the use of military force that came in after 9/11. Well, I think that's a misapplication of it. But who really cares about the law? They just do whatever they want. They don't care about the Constitution. They want a war on drugs. They have a war on drugs. They don't need to bother with any stinking amendment like they did with the 18th Amendment to prohibit alcohol. They just do what they want. And what it has created is a war in Mexico. As I pointed out, even last year when you had aerial bombing campaigns and missiles being fired in Syria, they were only just slightly ahead of the body counts in Mexico. And now that has stopped. Yeah, I mean, in Mexico, it was pretty much one-on-one violence with machetes and mutilations and assassinations and so forth. But it broke out into a real war that was captured by a lot of people on social media last night. I just showed you that clip. There's a lot of clips off of social media. What happened was they had about 30 members of the militarized police and National Guard patrolling the northern city of Culiacan, the capital of Sinaloa, Mexico state. They were fired on from a house, and so then it was on. And first they went in and took over that house. They had about 30 members of the Mexican military, and they found in the house, they found the son of El Chapo. They arrested him. But before they could get out of there, the house was surrounded by heavily armed supporters. And they had a gun battle that went for hours. Residents are running for cover. You can see machine gun fire going on. A lot of people putting this out, as I said, on social media. In one video, families with young children are getting out of their cars, laying flat on the ground. Bullets are cracking overhead. One little boy says, "Dad, can we get up now?" And his dad says, "No, stay on the floor." And so after this went on for hours, and you had the Sinaloa drug cartel guys that came up, they had armored vehicles with military-grade machinery exchanging heavy artillery fire against federal troops in Culiacan, the heart of Sinaloa. The shootout forced the residents to flee. These guys had black ski masks on as they were shooting. And so finally, the federal troops, the federales, gave up. And they released El Chapo's son to keep it from continuing. It's basically, as it was repeated by Fox News, they said it resembled a war zone. Folks, it is a war zone. It is a drug war zone, but we don't care about that. We don't care about that. And it's absolutely, totally unnecessary. You know how you stop the drug war? Look at what it did to their profits when marijuana was legalized. The trouble is that these organizations are not going to just go away and fade into the night now. They have been created by the war on drugs, and they're now going to have to be put down by force. But one of the things that you can do is to take away their profit center. Whenever you prohibit something, you create things like the Sinaloa drug cartel, El Chapo, just like alcohol prohibition created the Al Capones. And the way you make these people go away is you have it as a legal substance, still controlled. But you're not going to be, as much as you dislike the use of recreational drugs, and there's good reason to dislike it, but understand that you're not going to be able to stop this with prohibition. I've talked many times to Jim Gierach. Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. It's an organization of mostly retired law enforcement agents, judges, attorneys, district attorneys, and so forth, who have been drug warriors, and they said that this just isn't working. You know, not every problem is something that requires a hammer. Sometimes you need a screwdriver. And the problem is that government believes that everything needs to have the same solution, and that is law enforcement. People with guns in your face, locking people up that don't do what we say. Well, that's not worked for 48 years with the war on drugs. And I would suggest that the whole purpose of the war on drugs was to create exactly this type of problem. You know, when we go back and we look at regime change that's being done all across the Middle East, I think we need to change the name of that, quite frankly. Let's not call it the Middle East. What's it in the middle of? It's the middle of every war, but instead of calling it the Middle East, why don't we give it a name that's more reflective of our policy? We could call it the Middle East. MEDDLE, because that's where we meddle in the affairs of other countries and don't know what we're doing and always make the situation worse. But we make a lot of money for the military-industrial complex and the corporate sponsors of Lockheed Lindsay. It's not just Lockheed, it's all the military-industrial complex. That's really the point of us being there. But when we look at the war on drugs, the war on terror, when we look at the crisis at the border, why is it that they don't want to do anything about this? I think that they want these problems because the ultimate place where we've had regime change is here in America, and it's already taken place. This isn't about keeping President Trump in. We got to get serious someday about putting the Constitution back in power, because the Constitution is the lawful king of this country. Lex Rex. The law is king. That was the principle on which the founders drew when they wrote the Constitution. These politicians that come and go are nothing but temporary stewards. The true king is the Constitution. And they've been unfaithful stewards. It's time for a return of the king. We need to put the king back in power. We've had regime change here for far too long, and we need to stop this war. But they're using violence, threats of violence, the drug war, the war on terror, the war at the border. They want to have that crisis. It's so bad, as I pointed out, the Terminator movie that's coming out, the producers opted to film the Mexican scenes in Madrid. The designers recreated Mexican towns there, said the director Tim Miller. He told journalists that security risks and costs were too high to actually film there. Well, maybe they consider filming in Syria because it's not nearly as bad as Mexico is. Mitt, Lindsay, you hear that? And of course, they'd had a guy who was scouting locations for the Netflix series Narcos. And as he was doing that, I guess he got into an authentic situation because the cartel gunman actually killed him. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. I was just showing you the literal war. I mean, we had heavy artillery fire. We had heavy machine guns mounted to armored vehicles attacking federal troops who had, as part of their patrol, had come across the son of El Chapo. They arrested him. A heavy firefight went on for several hours until finally the federales gave up and released El Chapo's son and got out of there. That's the situation in Mexico. A failed state due to the war on drugs. Mission accomplished. That has always been the intention, folks. They're not ever going to stop drugs by interdiction. It is a medical issue, it is a psychological issue, but really at its core, it is a spiritual issue. It is not a law enforcement issue. And as I said, I've talked many times to law enforcement officers who saw the damage that happens to people using drugs and thought they could stop it by force. They realized that no, all it does is destroy our country. It destroys our judicial system. It overcrowds our prison system, gives us more people locked up than we've ever had before. And when we look at what is happening at the border, it's just absolutely amazing. They're never going to give up with this. This is a perfect opportunity for them. As a matter of fact, a lot of those clips that we were showing you, I was talking to the crew during the break, they reminded me, these clips, a lot of them are coming from cartel members, bragging about what they're able to accomplish. They're allowed on Twitter and Facebook and all these other social media places that have shut down InfoWars and Alex Jones. They allow these people to operate. Why is that? Are they just crazy? Is that crazy? Is it hypocritical? No, it is intentional, folks. They want you to see the violence. They want you to see the terrorists. They want you to see the drug war, because the drug war, the war on terror, and the situation at the border empowers the government. They want you afraid. They want you surrendering your freedom in the vain hope that these wars are going to keep you secure. All they do is endanger you. They don't want these wars to end. You talk about endless wars in the Middle East. We meddle in everybody's affairs. Yeah, it's no, the endless war is the war to take away your liberty. And the tools that they use to do it are these wars against drugs, these wars against terror, and both of those come together at the war on the border. Yeah, what they don't want you to see is they don't want you to see their agenda. They don't want you to see how important your freedom is. They don't want you to see what's being done to the Constitution. That's why they took us also off of social media, and they put the drug cartels up and leave them up. They want you afraid. They want you clamoring for safety to them and surrendering everything that previous generations gave us, the Constitution, your individual liberties and so forth that they fought to establish. Those liberties come from God, but they fought to establish them. They fought to prohibit the government from taking them, and now the government says, look at these problems, by the way, which they created. And so we're told by Ed Snowden, and I took apart his book. Quite frankly, I think his book is not only a self-serving hagiography, but it's also a misdirection. Big misdirection. In his book, oh yes, you know, the whole narrative is I and these other people there, I joined the NSA, I joined the CIA because I just wanted to do something in the wake of 9/11. I just wanted to defend America, but we overreacted. We felt very bad that 9/11 had happened on our watch, and you know, they just went a little bit too far. They overreacted. It was mission creep. No, I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all. I mean, he's still selling you that fake narrative. And he's been totally silent about the purge on social media, hasn't he? But now he's coming out because he's talking about how we need to keep encryption. I agree with that. I agree with that. He wrote an op-ed piece for The Guardian. Without encryption, we will lose all privacy. This is our new battleground. Well, that is true, but it's only a small part of the picture. Because we've already they've already silenced the cannons on social media, these same people that he worked with. And he had nothing to say about that. They were bragging about how they were going to do it, and then they did it. And it's not just enough to keep our privacy. We need to have access to the digital public media. And we need to have freedom in physical space. Does Ed Snowden, is he not, I mean, he's living in Russia, you know, but is he not aware of biometric surveillance rolling out everywhere? I mean, this is not just cyberspace we're talking about. This is physical space that we're talking about. And the efforts to track you by your appearance, to identify you by your ear, for example, if you put a mask on, or the way that you walk if you put a hood over your entire head. And so is he not really aware of the massive move to track us in physical space, the biometric surveillance state? Is this another misdirection from somebody that worked with the CIA and the NSA to tell us, well, just worry about encryption. And by the way, we got to stand behind Facebook, Google, and Apple. They've been good in terms of encryption. Baloney. William Binney said you're never going to be able to have a code that somebody can't break. It's just a question of how long it takes them and how many people they can do it to. And that's just a question of computing power. That's the reality from William Binney, a man you can trust who has worked, he was a global technical head of the NSA for decades. And I believe him. Now, you better believe him. That there is no such thing as encryption that can't be broken eventually. If somebody is a big enough target, they will focus enough assets on them until they crack that. And then it gets to the point where when they have a sufficient amount of computing power compared to everybody else, they can get most of the people, most of the time, until they get enough computing power and then get everybody all the time. So to say that it's all about encryption is really another misdirection. It's another half-truth. It's true enough, but it's only half true. For example, take a look again at what is happening at the border with this border crisis, a joining together of the war on drugs and the war on terror that have been used to do regime change here in the United States to overthrow our Constitution. At the border, the government is testing mass surveillance before they're going to turn it on you. You understand that? This is a beta test that's happening not just in China, it's happening on our very own border. And it's being justified by the crisis that they have created. You never let a crisis go to waste. And if there isn't a crisis, you create one. That's what we've seen with 9/11. That's what we've seen with regime change in Syria. And it's what we're seeing here with this as well. As the article from Medium.com points out, if you walk along the U.S. border in remote stretches of the New Mexico desert, you might not hear the buzz of what could be flying above you. A Predator drone. Yeah, you won't hear it because it's so high. The same vehicle that has been outfitted to drop bombs over Afghanistan and Iraq, the instruments of defense abroad, become the tools of tyranny at home. We were warned about that by Madison. From 5 miles away, the drone's camera can see so well that they can tell if you're wearing a backpack. If you're at the Florida Keys, you may be spotted by an altogether different set of eyes in the sky. 10,000 feet up in the air, a football field-sized Zeppelin floats with an array of cameras, sensors, and radar systems so sophisticated that it can track every car, aircraft, and boat within a 200-mile range. And if you're in the deserts of southern Arizona, it won't be hard to notice the 160-foot towers that rise up from the sandy landscape, equipped with advanced thermal imaging that can sense your exact movements from over 7 miles away. So think about this and ask yourself, if they have this kind of intelligence and ability, why is it that we can't control our border? Here's the answer, in case you haven't figured it out, because they don't want to control the border. It's not just about voters and workers. Predator drones high in the sky watching the borders, the same things that we use to kill terrorists in Afghanistan, Iraq, and the Florida Keys. 10,000 feet up, they've got football field-sized Zeppelins watching everything that everybody's doing, tracking every car, every aircraft, every boat within a 200-mile range. And Arizona, 160-foot towers, thermal imaging to watch your movements from 7 miles away. So why is it we can't control the border? Why do we have thousands of people coming across every day? They make a big parade out of it, right? And our government does nothing. Why is that? Because it's not just about the Democrats wanting voters. It's not just about the Republican donors wanting cheap labor for their corporations. The government in general wants a crisis so that you'll come begging to them to take away your freedom and protect you from the threats. And there are real threats, as we saw. The shootout with the federales and how they were overwhelmed by the Sinaloa drug cartel. They were able to free El Chapo's son after he was arrested. After several hours, the federales gave up, said, here, you can have him. Stop shooting. We give up. Fully armored cars, mounted machine guns, artillery. It is a literal war. And our government's not going to do anything about it. We created it. We created the problem with the drug war, just like we created Al Capone. And they want that because they want you coming to them begging for safety. They want that crisis. That's more important to them than the workers or the voters. They want the crisis to keep overthrowing our government because that's the ultimate power. The power to overthrow the government, to have regime change here. As this article on Medium was saying, to call all this technology Orwellian would be anachronistic. Even George Orwell could never have imagined anything like this. And they quote Jeffrey Tucker, a libertarian think tank, American Institute for Economic Research. He's the director there. Said people who would otherwise have a knee-jerk reaction against federal overreach suddenly acquiesce when the government develops enormous power in the name of border security. And as a matter of fact, we look at this and we say, well, I've said, and I still agree, because I don't think we're going to stop what we've now created. We've created a monster with the war on drugs for nearly 50 years. And we're not going to stop that without the use of force now. But we have to also address the root cause, which is drug prohibition. And so if we stop drug prohibition, then we need to, by force, dismantle these people, and we need to have some border protection. But they're going to keep this crisis going. They're going to keep the failed strategy prohibition going because that's what feeds all of this. And then they're going to escalate this war at the border, just like they have escalated the fear and the war on terror that they created, just like they've escalated drug use, as well as the prison population, as well as corruption of our judicial system, as well as corrupting the police through civil asset forfeiture, turning our police departments into thieves and partnering with them at the federal level, incentivizing this, telling them they've got to do this. You know, if you don't confiscate stuff without any due process, without even charging these people with a crime, let alone finding them guilty, if you don't do that, well, you know, we're not really going to cooperate with your police department. But if you do, we'll let you share in the loot. How about that? That's your federal government. Don't tell me we haven't already had regime change here in America. As Tucker said, look at what you're giving up. All your basic constitutional rights that you would normally fight for get confused when it comes to the immigration issue. Well, it comes to that whenever there's any kind of a crisis. People go begging to the government to protect them right after 9/11. Keep us safe, keep us secure, take my freedom, please. Right? How's that worked out for us? But we got conservatives who should know better. We got Christians who should be concerned about total surveillance and about E-Verify, which is basically saying without a digital ID and permission from the government, you will not buy or sell or trade. Does that sound familiar to you, Christians? Is that something you should be afraid of, libertarians? Damn well right it is. Why are you accepting this? There are other solutions for this. They're not being offered to you, but there are other solutions. You don't have to go down this path. And so, you know, when we look at this, as he points out, the momentum comes from lobbying by the tech industry, because the tech industry are the ones who are now at the core of the big profit center, the part of the military-industrial complex that's really ramping up quickly, is the police state surveillance state industrial complex. You know, a sub-branch of the military-industrial complex. It's what they've really been working on to get started here in this country. You know, they had to kind of take a back seat for a while, and the Soviet Union collapsed. We didn't have an enemy to, you know, justify spending lots of money on intercontinental ballistic missiles and giant bombers and so forth. So what are we going to do? Oh, we have this war on terror. We get the police state, the surveillance state going. And now they're bringing that back with all the Russia panic, right? So now they're getting back their big, you know, Cold War weapon systems. But now you've got the tech industry at the very center of this. And so they're lobbying for this biometric surveillance. You don't think the tech lobby was there when it came to social media? You think it's only now that they're getting involved when it's biometric surveillance that Ed Snowden doesn't want to talk about? Just like he didn't want to talk about the social media controls? No, they were there with the government, with DARPA from the very beginning, as I've pointed out many times. As we look at Facebook, again, you know, what are these people covering up? Well, let's expose some of this. Facebook denies moderating comments, as Zuckerberg did a big free speech live stream. And this is from the Daily Dot. People were saying, you know, watching here in the Philippines, thank you so much for the wonderful creation of Facebook. Thanks for another speech, again, about free expression. Oh, this is, we're really proud of you. It's a wonderful platform. Thank you, sir, for the great job. All this praise from Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, is this being done by Russian bots or what? I've never seen anything so fake, right? Everybody talks Russian bots, Russian bots. Well, as Daily Dot points out, you would think that everybody loves the Zook, based on the comments during his live stream, as he extolled the virtues of free expression and spoke at Georgetown University. Everybody's saying, thanks, Mark Zuckerberg, for bringing the world together again. Throughout the roughly 30-minute speech, the comments remained almost entirely the same. Zuckerberg was called everything from brave to inspirational, and heart emojis bombarded the screen. Thank you for bringing Facebook to the world. But as Zuckerberg offered his unfiltered, as he said, views on the state of free speech, how's that for irony, okay, in the digital era? And I guess we could spell that E-R-R-O-R. Questions arose as to whether negative comments were in fact being filtered. And so the Daily Dot reached out to them and said, are you moderating comments? And they said, we are not moderating comments. And then they further asked if all the profiles that weighed in on his speech were authentic, or if they were bots. They didn't respond to that. So where is all this coming? I mean, is there some kind of, you know, thing out there to manipulate us? as I pointed out many times, Facebook was funded by the Atlantic Council, the think tank, very closely aligned with NATO. They gave a lot of money to Facebook in the early days. Now Facebook is giving them a lot of money. And, the interesting thing is that in May of 2018, 3 months before they deplatformed InfoWars, they had a very public announcement that Facebook is going to be partnering with the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Lab in order to censor fake news. And that was 3 months before they deplatformed InfoWars. Now, 6 months before that, you had in congressional testimony, you had a spokesman for the intelligence community and the military-industrial complex come on and say, we have to stop the big cannons on social media. They're winning the information war. And so they did. You had Facebook then openly partnering with the Atlantic Council. And lo and behold, we now find out that the DC's Atlantic Council was getting lots and lots of money from the Ukrainian company that Hunter Biden was involved in. Isn't this interesting how it's all just kind of like one big club? It's kind of like a Charles Dickens novel, isn't it? They all live in this little town called Washington, D.C. And they're all related to each other in these incestuous relationships here. The Atlantic Council, Facebook, Biden, we'll have more on this when we come back. Folks, if you want to keep us going here, we really do need your help. I mean, we're fighting the biggest organizations all allied together, all allied against us. We have 40 to 70% off dozens of products at InfoWarsStore.com. Free shipping, double Patriot points. We got BrainForce Plus, 50% off. Survival Shield, X3 Nascent Iodine, 70% off. Many other products. Take a look. InfoWarsStore.com. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's take a little bit of a look at this devil's triangle between Facebook, the Atlantic Council, and Biden's Burisma. The Ukrainian corporation that's at the center of all this discussion that's going on, the gas company, that's their natural gas. The Burisma Group is now giving about $250,000 a year to the Atlantic Council. It's not just the Bidens that are getting lots of money. Max Blumenthal points out the Atlantic Council raked in funding from Hunter Biden's Ukrainian employer while courting his vice presidential father. The Atlantic Council has featured Biden as a star speaker in many of its award ceremonies over the years. The Beltway Press routinely runs quotes from Atlantic Council experts on the scandal without acknowledging their relationship with Hunter Biden's former employer. It is acknowledged by most people to be NATO's think tank in Washington. Now, there's other things that they don't talk about with this Atlantic Council that I've talked about, others have talked about. Gabby Fiorino with Liberty Nation, 3 months before we were taken off, May of 2018, before we were taken out of social media, pointed out that the Atlantic Council and Facebook were partnering together for censorship. So the Atlantic Council will be employed to release insight and updates on campaigns across the world, and Facebook claims that the think tank has a stellar reputation. Do they really? She said, well, they publish, Atlantic Council publishes information from the Xinhua news agency founded by the Communist Party of China that is a renowned source of Chinese propaganda, but it's published by NATO's Atlantic Council. It was identified as propaganda by the University of South Carolina and others. The importance of countering the effort with Facebook is immense. Social media, she wrote at the time, that was 3 months before we were deplatformed, and then 2 months later you had 800 sites. What did they all have in common? It wasn't that they were all conservative or libertarian. It's that we all opposed the militarized police and surveillance state. We opposed endless, eternal wars. That's really where the dividing line is on this censorship issue. And that's why the Atlantic Council has been there from the very beginning. Funding Facebook from Facebook's very beginning. And then Facebook returned the favor and gave them money back. And then you got Biden's Burisma giving money to the Atlantic Council. They bring Biden in and he speaks. This is a very tight relationship with all these people. As she pointed out, 3 months before the censorship began with InfoWars, that social media had become the chief conduit through which news, information, and entertainment, even commerce, flow to about 70% of Americans. And 6 months before that, as I pointed out, they said, we got to stop the cannons on social media. It's having too big of an effect. We're losing the information war here. We got to get back our complete monopolistic control like we did back in the old days of the good old days. Mockingbird Press, we had just 3 networks and NPR, and they all told you the same thing about everything. And they could very easily hide information from you. So yeah, the Atlantic Council has been there from the very beginning. And now we got Facebook out there. Lying through his teeth, Zuckerberg says that he is a champion of free speech at Georgetown University. And on his stream, just accolades of praise. I mean, this is straight out of Orwell. Unbelievable what's there. Well, what else are they hiding? Well, as we look at this and the Atlantic Council, everything that Russia says is bad, but you can, we'll feed you the press releases from the Chinese Communist government's own news source via Atlantic Council and Facebook. And Facebook and Twitter will put up the drug cartels and the violence in Mexico because they want you afraid. Be afraid. Be very afraid. Give us your freedom. And so then we have the NBA commissioner talking about how China had told them before they punished them, said China demanded that we fire the Houston Rockets general manager, Daryl Morey. Well, they did delete the tweet, and they did kowtow to some extent, and he's trying to get back his self-respect, but we'll talk more about that when we come back. We look at what's happening with the NBA, and the fact the NBA commissioner, Adam Silver, said yesterday the Chinese government insisted that the league fire Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey over the now-deleted tweet supporting protesters in Hong Kong. He said, we made it clear that we were being asked to fire him by the Chinese government, by the parties that we dealt with, government and business. Well, there isn't any difference between government and business in China. They have merged. That's why it is a textbook case of fascism, not communism. China is like Nazi Germany. They're hyper-nationalist, and they have, so from that standpoint, they're fascist. They're militaristic, hyper-nationalist, and they have merged business and government, and that's the economic definition of fascism. They are textbook fascist in every regard. And the Hong Kong people said that, called them Nazis, and they are Nazis, literally Nazis. I mean, this is not a hyperbole here in every respect. And so, they caved somewhat. They didn't fire the Houston Rockets general manager, but they kind of leaned on him, or somebody did. He deleted the tweet. So now they're coming out, they're pushing back because it's gotten very bad. I mean, that wasn't enough to appease the Chinese government. And so he said, we said there's no chance we're going to fire him. There's no chance we'll even discipline him. And he says, however, the losses now have been substantial. Our games are not back on the air in China as we speak, and we'll see what happens next. Well, I would just say, buck up. Do the right thing. Because these people in the NBA made a fortune. The team managers, just like the NFL, they become billionaires. The team players are all multimillionaires. And they did that without any money from China. How greedy do you have to be? Seriously. I mean, my heart does not really cry for them. I hope that they do stand up to this. I hope that is the narrative. But, when I look at LeBron James, the guy has become such a craven coward. Pandering to these people. Yeah, he was so brave and so woke when he protested America. But let me tell you something. He was doing it for the money then, and he's doing it for the money now. That's right. His Nike sponsors wanted him to do that. All these people who are praising him, oh, you're great, you're standing up to the government. There was no cost for that. There would have been a cost to him if he had gone the other way. He's always taken the easy way out. He's always been a prostitute for corporate sponsorship. And now he's out there. They've got NBA fans raising. You've seen the pictures on the Drudge Report, I think is where it was. The picture of him as morphed into Mao. They've got kind of the tip. Pull that picture up there. The distinctive hairline of Chairman Mao. They've taken LeBron James and they've given him the bald, receding hairline. But then how Mao's hair puffs out on the side. There he is, right there. We saw that all the time in China when we went to adopt my daughter, and I thought it looked so funny because that in a lot of the pictures, that side hair is pretty pronounced, almost like Mickey Mouse ears. And I always called him Mickey Mao. whenever I'd see Chairman Mao pictures like that. And so now they've got LeBron James as Mickey Mao. And it's very suitable, I think. I got him dressed up in a Chinese military uniform with a Chinese background like they do Mao over there. One NBA fan has raised $43,000 for Stand with Hong Kong T-shirts to protest LeBron. Well, more power to him, because we need to stand up to this kind of censorship, the kind of false narrative. These guys have got cards they're not showing, folks. And that's what we're all about here. We're going to show those cards to you that they don't want to show. As a matter of fact, we've got coming up in the next segment, we're going to have Eric Peters, and we're going to be talking about some of the issues with mobility and with freedom that we always do talk about. One of the things that has come up in the last couple of weeks, you look at what other things are they hiding when they're pushing us into this centrally controlled transportation system that they've got? You know, the autonomous cars, they're not autonomous. They're centrally controlled. What I have now is an automobile. Auto, meaning self. I'm the one that directs it, and it gives me mobility. It's an automobile. These autonomous vehicles are not autonomous. They're going to be centrally controlled using 5G as the infrastructure. That's why they're going to push it on you, because they don't care about your health or your privacy. They're going to use 5G to bring that biometric surveillance that they've got at the border. They're going to bring that in to the cities. And they don't care what kind of health effects it has against you. If it gives you cancer, if it, however it affects you biologically, they don't care at all. As a matter of fact, that's just a bonus for them. They do know that, as they've looked at some of these experiments, they do know that at the very least it'll help to pacify you physically. And if it doesn't, they will pacify you psychologically by watching everything that you do, everywhere that you go. The fastest growing part of our intelligence community has been the geospatial intelligence community. Activity-based intelligence and geospatial intelligence and mastering the human domain is what they call it. Human domain analytics, all of that is the fastest growing part of that. And so they have to take away your mobility, centrally controlled transportation. You'll have the big corporations working with big government, just like they do in China, merging together in a fascist system of control. And so when we look at this, now we have the National Traffic Safety Board. Now they're going to keep you safe, right? It's all about safety. They're now going to, Reuters reported, they're now going to determine the probable cause of the fatal Uber self-driving crash. Well, we know what the cause was. I mean, this was a year and a half ago, March of 2018. We got the video, both inside the car and outside the car. We know that this car ran over the woman. We know the fact that the only thing in question to these people, I guess, is whether or not it was because the emergency braking system was turned off because it was so erratic, or whether or not the vision system failed on the autonomous car. But nevertheless, the woman who was crossing the street is dead. And here's the key thing that they're not talking about in Reuters. The experimentation on public roads continues. They really don't care. They really don't care. Joe Biden made a big point for many years of talking about the central tragedy in his life. He lost both his wife and his daughter. His sons were hospitalized in an automobile accident. But he lied about that for many years. He drug another person's name through the dirt for that. Everybody was talking about, it's corn pop stuff. And says, it sounds like he made that up. I was a lifeguard and I had to take that corn pop guy on. I just taught him. And everybody jumped to his defense, as Western Journal points out. You had the NAACP chairman back up his story. Oh, yeah, there was a notorious dude that was called Corn Pop. Yeah, he's not lying. He's telling the truth, right? Well, no, he wasn't. He wasn't telling. Maybe he was telling the truth about that. I seriously doubt it. He's been caught in other lies about war heroes and so forth. They say, it was a composite. But in the case of one individual, in the December 1972, just weeks after he was first elected to the Senate, his wife and daughter were killed in a car accident while Christmas shopping. The truck driver who hit them, was then demonized by Joe Biden for years as a drunk driver. And that was not the case. According to the local paper, Biden's wife drove her car into the path of his truck. He did everything possible to avoid a collision, even overturning his truck in the process, and he was the first person to get there to render assistance. But that's not the way that Joe Biden told it. He said a tractor-trailer, a guy who allegedly, and I never pursued it, drank his lunch instead of eating his lunch, broadsided my family and killed my wife instantly, killed my daughter instantly, hospitalized my 2 sons. He said that in 2007. In 2001, he had said that Dunn was, quote, an errant driver who stopped to drink instead of drive and hit a tractor-trailer, hit my children and my wife, and killed them. You know, if this guy was a drunk driver, you don't think he would pursue it? Well, maybe he just thought the National Traffic Safety Board would pursue it like they pursue the hit-and-run stuff. No, the guy died in 1999. It was his daughter who was very upset. She said, I heard this, I just burst into tears. The story is tragic enough, but the line to say my father was drunk? The judge who was there said the rumor about alcohol being involved is absolutely incorrect. Tersely, when he spoke to Politico, he said, she had a stop sign, the truck driver did not. I concur that there was no fault on his part. But there is fault on Biden. We'll be right back. Stay with us. You know, you can get your Christmas shopping done early. We got a lot of products that I would put in the category of preparedness. We've got water filters. Everybody should have clean water. You never know what's going in your water. Once you get it tested, you can't get it tested all the time. There may be something very hazardous, very dangerous that you and your family have been drinking for a while before you get it tested, so be proactive. Make sure it's always filtered. I've seen stories about contamination spills and the underground water supplies in California. I looked up the substance, and time and again, I have seen it 99.9% filtered out of these filters. I mean, there's a large array of things that are filtered, and not just inorganic contaminants, toxins like that. But also bacteria and other things are filtered out of there. So take a look at the water filters. Take a look at the air filters. You get a lot of concentrated contaminants in your home as you try to seal it up during winter months or even during summer months. So we have water filters, air filters, storable food, all kinds of preparedness products. You never know when you're going to lose electricity. Just ask the people in California. We'll be talking about that with Eric Peters. You never know when our infrastructure is going to crumble. You don't need to have a hurricane come through or some kind of a storm to destroy your infrastructure. It's just falling apart under the law of thermodynamics and the incompetence of government. So be prepared, be proactive, and also we've got a lot of natural supplements that are very safe, effective, and discounted right now, 40 to 70% off. Things like Survival Shield X3 Nascent Iodine, 70% off. Brain Force Plus, 50% off. We have Natural Sleep Aid Knockout, 50% off. Natural Anti-Inflammatory Bod Ease, 50% off. Our toothpaste that has nano silver in it and doesn't have any fluoride. It's got the good halogen iodine in it. That's also 50% off. Free shipping, double Patriot points. Take a look at InfoWarsStore.com, folks. We really appreciate your support, and that's what funds our program. If you're listening on radio or television, make sure you support those sponsors. Tell them why. Tell them that you appreciate the radio station and you appreciate these sponsors sponsoring this. But the way that we're funded is with the products that you buy at InfoWarsStore.com. All right, joining us now is Eric Peters at EP Autos. And Eric, you got some great articles there talking about what's going on with transportation and freedom. Before we get to that, though, there's been just in the last day or so several things come out of the electric vehicle community, finding a problem with Tesla cars that, you know, most of the Tesla cars are only 3 or 4 years old or less. And so now we're starting to see some reliability issues, and there's a really strange issue that has to do really with a memory problem. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's actually something called flash memory. And if I recall, you have some background in computers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so essentially what's happening is the vehicle is trying to log data and repeatedly overwriting a component, or I guess, what would you call it? Is it a chip that's the physical part
it's a cheap flash memory card. And the problem is, though, that it's so tightly integrated in with their motherboard that you can't just replace that cheap memory card.
Yeah,
and you got to replace that memory board for like $1,800.
Yeah, you have to be somebody who's competent to take a car apart just to get at it, and then you have to even assuming you can do that, then you have to have specialized expertise in repairing delicate electronic components, which, of course, most people haven't got. So then you got to farm that out to somebody who does have that expertise. And if you don't do that, my understanding is essentially that the car bricks. The big touch screen that controls everything goes dark, and the car won't charge. And mind you, this is a 4-year-old car.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And the thing that's really funny about this is that this is information that the guys who discovered it said the information logged on here is pretty much useless on production vehicles. In other words, it was something that's an artifact of when they were doing the testing. Right. Unless a developer has a specific reason for enabling it, it doesn't do any good to the customer either. And they rarely download this at Tesla. So this is just kind of an artifact that was left on there during testing. But it's an integrated part of the media control unit, which is kind of like the motherboard that's there. Right. And as you continually write this flash memory, after a while you get fatigued with these parts. And you know, we've seen this many times with some of the silicon hard drives and everything. After a while, they start to get fatigued, and that's what's happening with these cars. And it's not a theory that it's going to happen. It's already happened to several of these cars. They can't get this chip replaced. They just have to replace the whole board. That's typically the case anymore. People don't go in and do component-level repair. They just typically swap out boards. It's an $1,800 board.
Yeah, well, the whole thing is it's a 4,000-pound cell phone, essentially.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
You know, it's. I think the analogy is very apt. It's a fundamentally disposable thing because of the nature of the thing, because of the cost of the electronics, the complexity of the electronics, the inevitability of these complex and very expensive electronics failing, and the cost to fix them being so enormous relative to the value of the vehicle that you're better off just throwing it away. You know, we don't fix cell phones, we chuck them and get a new one. And that's the idea with the Tesla and all electric cars.
And of course, the other thing about cell phones that I'm increasingly not liking and thinking about just going back to an old ancient flip phone and some kind of a pager is the fact that they can push out updates to me. I mean, they used to not even do that on the cell phones, and then they said, well, we'll take that as a right of ours to constantly push updates out to you and breaking stuff, right? So it's not even a planned obsolescence. It is a forced obsolescence when they do that on the cell phones, and that's one of the things that I would have a problem with a Tesla. And this is increasingly, as you pointed out, they've turned our cars into big cell phones, and you see this in the big corporate reviews of automobiles. They will focus, they'll get a pickup truck, and they'll spend all their time talking about the stereo system and not about the horsepower or the towing ability or its ability to get through difficult traction situations. It's all about the entertainment system.
Yeah, and, you know, getting back to these updates, I liken it to waking up in the middle of the night because you got to go to the bathroom, and you go into the bathroom, and unbeknownst to you, the plumber has come into your house and moved the toilet to a different room.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe put it in the shower like in Norway. They're telling everybody, don't use the toilets, pee in the shower. So just go to the shower and save the time, right?
Something that is ostensibly yours, that you bought, so you're nominally the owner, nonetheless is under the control of these forces over which you have no control. It's a really interesting, strange dynamic about the times that we live in. And, you know, with regard to the flip phones that you're talking about, and even cell phones, what they'll do is they'll force you to give it up by no longer supporting it.
Yes.
Even though the thing is still perfectly functional, they pull the plug, so to speak, and it will no longer operate.
And that's the thing that I'm really concerned about with the cars that work, the cars that are durable. We've talked many times about how they want to get all durable diesel engines and gasoline engines off because they want you to get into this rental model where you rent by the ride. And, of course, they can do it by fiat. They're doing it all across Europe, just banning city by city, and then it's going to go to the national level, not having any gasoline or diesel engines there. But ultimately, Eric, what they're going to do is they're going to cut off our gasoline supply, just like they've gotten smart about gun control, and now they're starting to come for the ammunition, because if they take your bullets, then you just got a club. And if they take your gasoline, now you've got a museum piece that you can display.
Yeah, they have to do that. One of the striking ironies of this, you hear people who are electric vehicle apologists talk about, well, I've got no maintenance on my electric car. Well, except that the car stops working after 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. That's something a problem. We got to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back. Eric Peters, EPAutos.com. Stay with us. Well, Tesla has taken a special turn. They now have a kind of an Alzheimer's problem there. solid-state memory devices that they are rewriting, getting fatigue and then failing, and then causing the board to fail. And it's an $1,800 replacement on that. But that's just the beginning, because the batteries are going to start going out pretty soon. But Eric, let's talk about this newest proposal from Elon Musk, because it's not just the fact that he's getting subsidies for cars. You know, I don't really care what cars people buy, as long as they don't force me to, as long as they don't take away my choice, right? Which is really what we're talking about here. Everybody's like, oh, you should be all, pro-choice about all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, I am.
We are.
Yeah, we are pro-choice. You're the guys who are anti-choice, but they are the ones that are doing this when it comes to speech or when it comes to cars. It's like you embrace their speech or their choice in cars, or you shut up and, they're going to lock you out of this situation.
Right.
Yeah. But let's take a look at the article that you put up, rear views in the rear view. In other words, this is a new proposal from Elon Musk. It's not just about his subsidies, that I'm forced to pay and you're forced to pay. All taxpayers are forced to pay for people to be subsidized to get their electric vehicles. Mm-hmm. But this is now, he's going in with legislation. Tell us what he is now proposing.
Yeah, it's to further the gadgetization of cars. To give you some backstory on this, I think the cars have gotten to be so good that people are so bored with them that the manufacturers have to come up with some new gizmo to entice people to make them interested in getting rid of a perfectly good functional car for another one, and assuming a lot of debt. Well, what Musk wants to do now, if you can believe it, is to eliminate the physical outside rearview mirror and the rearview mirror in your car, and instead have a series of closed-circuit cameras all around the car, and then, of course, all that piped into, guess what, the touchscreen on the car.
Oh, yeah. And mandate this federally.
Mandate this, yeah.
So everybody have to have. Another example is you've been talking about needless complexity, needless expense, and all done in the name of mandates.
No meaningful improvement. I've got a muscle car in the garage. I've had it forever. It's almost 50 years old. It has the same rearview mirror that it left the factory in Lordstown, Ohio, with back in the summer of 1975.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if it falls off the windshield, it glues back on, and it'll be good for another 50 years. And if it fell on the floor and cracked, I can buy another one for about $20, and it's good for another 100 years.
Yeah, and I even just took off my rearview mirror.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a Cannonball Run, where you got the Raul Julia, is the Italian guy, and he gets in the car and goes,
right.
Well, in Italy, this is the first thing that goes, and he rips the mirror off, because I need to be able to see where I'm going. I don't really care too much about what's behind me, unless if the lights are flashing, I can see that. But the legal requirements are that you've got to have, 2 or 3 different mirrors. I've actually got 4 because I got some cheap, like $2 or $3 concave mirrors that I stuck on my side mirrors, and that eliminates any blind spots. If I've got my top up, I don't have to worry about any blind spots with it.
Right,
it's much better.
Well, what this is going to do, and by the way, it's not just Tesla. The other manufacturers are behind this too, because they know that it's yet another mechanism for them to increase their bottom line, because it's much more expensive to incorporate all of this technology into the car, and certainly it provides a mechanism for them to mulct you down the road when the electronics fail, and you have to buy it from them because it's proprietary and specific to that vehicle.
Oh, yeah.
Used to be you could go down to Napa or wherever and just get a generic mirror, if you needed one, and if you didn't have a ton of money to spend, but you needed the car to get through the safety inspection, get the $15 generic mirror and screw it into place, and you're fine. You're good to go.
Yeah. I mean, I with my extra concave mirrors I picked up for $3. The $3 solution, I can see everywhere. I've got no blind spots, and I don't need to have electronics feeding into a dash display and all that sort of thing.
Well, to get back to your issue about choice, I'm not opposed to this technology, and I would be fine with it if they wanted to offer this on higher-end vehicles for people who are gadget-obsessed and who have a superfluity of money, and they want to spend it on this kind of thing. Hey, be my guest.
Yeah.
But what they're talking about is force-feeding it to us, as with everything else, so that even the person who's trying to live a modest and economical life, or has no choice because they just don't have a lot of money, they're forced to buy this stuff.
That's right. Yeah, you take a look at the new C8 Corvette, for example. If I'm not mistaken, I think because of styling, it's got some blind spots in it. The way they overcame that, they put a camera up at the top of the roof, and they feed that back to where the rearview mirror is. And so, look, if styling it's all about styling, it's all about money, then go ahead and knock yourself out if you can afford it. But you're talking about the fact they're going to force this on everybody from the federal government, so that you've got another reason to buy a car and to buy repairs and updates from them down the road.
And curiously, here's another aspect that I was just fascinated by stuff like this. It's a safety hazard. What happens in the wintertime when it snows and the little micro cameras that are embedded all over the car are covered by snow or ice? Exactly. What are you going to do? I mean, you can't scrape the finish of the car, and that's what you'd have to do. These are very small if you've ever actually looked at them, and they're embedded in the plastic or the metal of the vehicle. So there is no way to clear them. I mean, I guess you could go out and get a bucket of hot water and ruin your paint and pour it over that, but this is a significant issue. When you have a physical outside mirror, you just knock the snow off of it, knock the glass off, or knock the ice off of it, and you can see.
Yeah, we just get a little torch and you burn your camera up trying to get the ice off. No problem at all.
Nobody seems to be thinking about this, and I think part of it has to do with the fact that a lot of this originates from these tech oligarchs who live in sunny Southern California, and they don't have to think about or worry about snow, and who cares about the rest of the country?
Yeah, but it's also the fact that there's this partnership between corporations and government, just like we see in China. I mean, there is no space whatsoever between the central party and business. You've got to be in the central party if you want to be a big businessman, right? And so it is total fascism by definition, a merger of corporations and government. And that's really what we're getting to closer and closer all the time. I just talked yesterday about the fact that Elon Musk got $5 million to educate from NASA to educate his SpaceX employees, because as a federal contractor, they need to make sure that they weren't violating federal laws on drug prohibition, because Elon Musk goes to Joe Rogan's program and he says, well, I'm in California so I can smoke a joint. Well, the feds say, but that's against our federal law, and we're going to give you, not to your competitors, but we'll give you $5 million to educate your people about not doing that. Meanwhile, you got people all over the country, as I pointed out yesterday, locked up for months for, they said, you got meth and it's actually honey, or just talked at the beginning of the program. They thought that a guy's kitty litter and that he put in a sock to dehumidify his car was meth. Another guy, they thought his powdered milk was cocaine. I mean, this is happening to people at the lower level, but Elon Musk gets $5 million to educate people.
Well, and also, to get back to this business of the Chinese, I'm sure you've been following this fiasco with the NBA, which is, crawling on, on its feet because it's so desperate to line its pockets with Chinese money to accommodate the thugs that run the Chinese government, which have now effectively are getting control over corporate America and thus over us here in America.
Everywhere. We can see it with the NBA. Where people don't see it is how they're propagandizing us to the control they've got over Hollywood. That is really embedded, and they're getting everything that they want from Hollywood.
Yeah, soon the Chinese are going to be telling us what we're allowed to watch here. They're already, of course, doing that in China, but it's inevitable that that's going to happen in here. They'll threaten to pull their financing from the big-budget Hollywood blockbuster movies, the cable deals, and all of that, and everybody who's behind that will fall into line.
Oh, yeah. Well, they've already been doing it. They've been doing it for a number of years, and they've had editorial control. They even, when they did a remake of, what was the Red Dawn, when they did that, that was originally going to be the Chinese. They said, you better not do that, and that's just the most obvious and one of the older versions of. They're doing it all the time. We'll be right back. Eric Peters, EPAutos.com. Stay with us. And if you don't understand it by now, you better understand that mobility is a big freedom issue. And that's about to be taken away from us as these autonomous cars, I think a better name for them is centrally controlled cars, are replacing these things. And a big part of that argument for replacement all revolves around the veneer of environmentalism. And so the electric vehicles are all wrapped up into that whole scheme. And so, Eric, you've got an article about Dyson, the vacuum maker. I guess they've come to the conclusion that they've abandoned their electric vehicle project. I guess they came to the conclusion that electric vehicles suck.
Well, yeah, they came to the conclusion that they're not commercially viable, which anybody who looks at the business will recognize. There's literally an EV bubble going on, and Tesla was the first, and then everybody else jumped on this crazy train and decided, yeah, sure, let's build cars that cost 50% more than otherwise equivalent combustion engine cars, and let's not worry about the fact that people's income has not increased by 50%, so how are they going to buy these things?
Yeah, and we're seeing auto sales, like in India, for example. I was just talking to Gerald Salenti yesterday. He said, look, it doesn't have anything to do with America. It doesn't have anything to do with China, trade. India's car sales are down by over 40%. And so we've kind of hit a peak here in terms of, you know, the rising cost of automobiles. Used cars are double what they used to be. Part of that is because of Obama's cash for clunkers to try to get reliable mechanical cars off of the market. You know, they said, well, we got to help the automobile manufacturers, and to some extent that was true. But I think there was also the motive that they wanted to get reliable, fixable, durable mechanical vehicles off of the road. And it's not only that, but it's also the workers. I mean, we've talked in the past about how this is going to be totally devastating for people who work in the transportation industry, truck drivers and so forth, as they come up with autonomous trucks. But it's now, you're seeing this as part of the GM strike. It's not just them talking about wages and imported vehicles, but the union there is very concerned about electric vehicles.
Well, as they should be, because what GM is planning on doing is eliminating a number of their factories that are currently devoted to manufacturing conventional vehicles and then offshoring the manufacture of electric cars to, guess where? China.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you got the CEO of GM, Mary, what is her name? Mary Barra? Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's out there talking about how, they're not going, they've got a very popular Cadillac that they're selling for, I think it's north of $100,000 or something. Mm-hmm. And people are lined up to buy that. They shut down the factory and said, we'll build some more of them at the Corvette factory. But they've got people begging to buy this. And they said, no, we're not going to sell that to you. Meanwhile, she's talking about how they're going to go completely electric. Mm-hmm. Right now, even with all the subsidies, it's only 2% of the market. 98% of the people don't want that product, and the electric vehicles that GM is making, they're losing, I think it's something like $9,000 per vehicle. So I guess what they're going to do, make up, we're losing $9,000 on every one of these, but we're going to make it up in volume. Is that it?
Well, I don't know what they're thinking. I fear that part of what they're thinking is to emulate what the Chinese are already doing, which is to permit you to drive a non-electric car, provided you pay a $14,000 fee, and no, that's not an exaggeration, for a special license plate that allows you to do so after you participate in a lottery for the opportunity to pay the $14,000 for the special fee to drive the car. They're going to have to figure out a way to make non-electric cars at least as expensive as electric cars in order for any kind of volume sales to ever happen. And, of course, that begs the question, even if you do that, how are people going to afford that? And they're not. I just don't see how this is going to happen unless people just go to ride sharing, which may be just the ultimate goal here. They just want you to pay by the mile, pay by the trip, and be in constant debt servitude for your mobility, which will now be under the control of these oligarchies and not you.
That's right. Yeah, the corporations want that. They're blatantly appealing to governments for that purpose. As a matter of fact, I covered one of these conferences where they're talking about their Agenda 2030 and, the big city that they're building in Saudi Arabia and so forth. And the guy was saying, look, millennials don't want to own anything. They want to rent everything. Nobody wants any ownership. And your citizens, blah, 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 they keep talking about citizens, not about consumers or anything. And so they're making their appeal to the government, putting out the idea that millennials don't want to own anything. Nobody wants to own anything. The reality is that these few people who are allied with the government, they do want to own, and they want to own everything, including you, because you're going to be basically their slave, and that's their future, is to own everything, and then the government will control your access to movement.
Well, and they're partially correct about the millennials. The millennials, a lot of them, have never known any better. They have nothing, and it's very difficult for them to get anything because the cost of everything has become so prohibitive.
Exactly.
So out of desperation, these kids are doing things. I'm sure you're familiar with this business of having pod sharing out in San Francisco and other high rent areas where they pay a ridiculous amount of money, $1,000 I think it is a month, to be able to have a dock house style bunk in some communal housing situation.
Yeah, and that's like what people are complaining about in Hong Kong. They said this revolution may be about that kind of an economic situation as much as anything else, because people are living in these same types of communal pods there and paying a lot of money for it. We're looking at the what is coming down the road. That's why you've got Yang and these other people pushing UBI, trying to pacify the population, because it's not just the truckers and the automobile factory workers that are going to be losing their job. In South Korea, they're talking about by 2030, they expect, or as soon as this AI, whenever that happens, in that time frame, they expect 70% of doctors and lawyers to lose their job. So we've got doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs. Pocahontas is going to be out of a job. I mean,
this has a synergistic effect. effect.
Yeah.
It spreads throughout the entire economy, and it results in the impoverishment of almost everybody except the people at the very apex of the pyramid.
Yeah. So they've got to try to control that. But what you're talking about here in China, and of course that's an article you got up. What's it going to be at epautos.com? The idea that they punish people who want to get a non-electric car, like you pointed out, $14,000, and you got to wait in line for a lottery to even get that. You have to wait for years. I remember when Top Gear, or actually they call it Grand Tour, when those guys went to China, they were talking about that and how difficult it was to get a license there, for your car. If you want to get a driver's license, you just have to be basically breathing, or not even that. There's no driving test necessary whatsoever. But to get a license for your car, that's pretty much impossible. But they grease the skids for people if they want to get an electric car. It's like, forget the lottery, forget all this. You can go ahead and get it right now.
Well, and they're doing the same thing here. It's interesting that they have withheld, for example, applying any type of significant taxes to electric vehicle owners to compensate for the fact that they're not paying the motor fuels taxes that you and I pay when we gas up our cars to pay for the roads that the electric car people are using just as much as we are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. The other thing you're talking about, too, is, what happened in California, our crumbling infrastructure, and what they found out there when they didn't have the power to charge their cars. We talked about this, I think, the last time you were on, how after Porsche put out their new electric vehicle, Elon Musk got upset and he directly went to the Nürburgring. And the problem was he didn't have the chargers there to charge it rapidly. So they brought a really loud and very foul diesel generator. Didn't have any control on it whatsoever. Put it right there. That's a perfect example of what's really going on. They don't want you to see what really feeds the electric grid, but right there everybody could see it. The neighbors are complaining about that, and that's what people were doing in California. They were getting out their diesel generators or gasoline generators to charge their electric vehicles.
Yeah, which, by the way, that's a really good way to start a forest fire. Somebody could inadvertently leave a generator next to some dry brush, and there you go. And the reason they had the problem in the first place is because PG&E, which is the utility monopoly in California, had spent an enormous, insane amount of money on green technologies, on solar and on wind farms, to such a degree that they no longer have the money to repair their physical infrastructure of wires, transformers, to cut brush, cut back trees, and all of that. So their solution, since they can't afford to do that, was just to throw the power switch to off and not let anybody have any power.
Yeah, like you pointed out, they're focusing on renewable energy sources, solar and wind, and to the extent that they don't even have the capability to connect those sources up to their own grid, and so they're paying neighboring states to take that power from them because they have no way to feed it into their grid, and they're not maintaining the grid, and so the grid is becoming dangerous and becoming a fire hazard. So they just turn the lights off, and it's all regulatory, it's all environmental, that everything that's happening in California.
Yeah, it's also a big pile-on. Now, you could imagine how the problem is going to magnify if and when all of a sudden half of the vehicles on the road are electric cars and the additional load on the grid that's going to apply.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're going to find out pretty soon because Volkswagen is going to be building, as part of their kowtow to the EPA, they're going to be building their network of chargers. So we're going to find out how that works real quickly. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Eric Peters, epautos.com. If you want to know about mobility and liberty, that's a great place to find out the latest, what's happening. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. We were talking to Eric Peters about the attempts to shut down our movement on the ground and to control everything. And, of course, it's not just on the ground. It is also in the air. We have the Postal Service now is exploring the idea of using drones to deliver packages. And at the same time, in New York City, we have de Blasio forcing a very profitable helicopter company there into bankruptcy, just regulating them into oblivion with prohibitions and so forth. But let's take a look at the Postal Service first. I mean, they're, as they point out, the Postal Service currently has no incumbent contractors that are fulfilling drone-related services, and so what they're trying to do is to change that. And of course, they're going to be. This is not going to be delivering letters. This is not. You could say, well, it's going to be literal airmail, but no, it's not going to be about that. They're trying to compete in the package business. No, nobody's doing snail mail anymore, right? Everybody's got email and texting and so forth, so people are not writing physical letters that need to be delivered, and that's a big problem for the post office because they have a postal monopoly on that. They don't have a monopoly on delivering packages, and so they have to compete with UPS and with Federal Express, and soon they're going to be competing with Amazon, and Amazon is going to be delivering packages via drone. You can bet that they're going to be able to buy their way through the regulatory morass that's set up for everybody else. There's going to be a barrier to keep other people from competing in that. But you know that Jeff Bezos will make it. I mean, it's one of the reasons why he strategically bought the Washington Post for such a small amount of money to him. $250 million, that's less than he makes on his typical stock appreciation in 1 week. That's about 4 days stock appreciation in the last couple of years. So it's chump change for him, but it gives him a lot of leverage in Washington. There you go. I don't know if that is that picture up there, that Amazon blimp. I don't know if that is for real or if that is some kind of a joke thing that somebody's put up. That's probably what it'll look like eventually. And probably have a bunch of drones swarming out of some kind of a Zeppelin floating over the cities. But they're trying to position themselves into this business. Said we're going to explore a ride-sharing model where customers can come in and use an application to connect to post office drones in the future. I don't know. I mean, who are they going to offer this to? It's very difficult for individual companies to compete against Amazon. It's going to be difficult for them to even exist and deliver their packages if Amazon is allowed to continue to grow and play the kinds of regulatory games that they're doing. So are they going to offer this to other businesses, or are other businesses going to be able to get delivery through the UPS, through the USPS? I don't know. I mean, I kind of am skeptical that these guys who are so late to this game, as they have been to every other game, who are so challenged in terms of trying to do things efficiently. I mean, just look at the cost of the Postal Service. Lysander Spooner, the reason they've got a legal monopoly is because Lysander Spooner nearly put them out of business when they were doing letter delivery. And so they, in order to stop that competition, they went to the government and got the government to give them a regulated, protected monopoly. And that's the kind of thing we see everywhere, quite frankly. I mean, you got in San Francisco, you've got a falafel shop owner that says that the neighborhood's got enough falafels. And so they want the city to block any rival falafel shops. It's the same game that the post office did to Lysander Spooner a century and a half ago. So I don't know, snail mail is dead. Are they going to resurrect something called mosquito mail, where they can bust you with that? I don't know. I think we're going to have drones all over us everywhere, and probably they'll be reporting back to the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, and the police, everything that you're doing. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Well, President Trump spoke yesterday in Dallas to a giant crowd, and there was even more attention than usual paid to this particular rally because a lot of people pointed out, and as I talked about it yesterday, I thought it was kind of strange. I wanted to talk about one of the gaffes of Biden in Tuesday night's debate, where he was talking about clipping stock coupons and stuff like that. It was kind of an antiquated, a very, very, very old analogy that really didn't touch base with anybody. But I thought that was kind of funny. But as I looked, the hashtags that were going out there about Biden, I saw this Biden 17 slip. And everybody was talking about the fact that Joe Biden had, during the debate, said Trump is going to be removed from office on the 17th. And it made this weird expression. I played the clip for you yesterday, caught himself, and then abruptly changed. It's like, what was that about? Did he have a gaffe there? Was Trump going to be, Trump is going to be in Dallas 2 days later on the 17th. What did he say? Trump's going to be removed from office on the 17th. And then it really did look like it was not intentional. Now, it did look like it was intentional when Nancy Pelosi at a press conference is rubbing her bracelet. Oh, look at this bracelet that was given to me. It's got bullets on it, and it's a color of orange. And orange is the color of gun violence. You hear that, President Trump? I mean, that looked like that was being put out there as a not-so-veiled threat. And, of course, Tom Arnold also tweeted out, he said, don't get too cocky, traitor, talking about the Dallas rally. They showed up for JFK, too. So when President Trump was talking about the large crowds that were coming to hear him in Dallas, he says, don't get too cocky. They showed up for JFK, too. So we got a lot of veiled threats, not so veiled threats, and gaffes that are happening. And so we talked about that. Best way to stop something like that from happening is to expose it, to get it out in the open, to basically blow the cover. So did Biden do that accidentally, or what's going on with that? Nevertheless, Alex Jones went to the Trump rally in Dallas in an armored vehicle. You can see the link to it on the Drudge Report earlier this morning. Here's what a little bit of that looks like. Let's play that clip.
The deep state is openly saying they're going to try to assassinate President Trump. Hands off our president, globalist traitors, and Chi-Com collaborators. You will not get control of America again. America is aware of your treason, and America is awake, and America is involved, and America is rising.
Okay, and of course, Nancy Pelosi, in talking about impeachment, said the voters are not going to decide this impeachment issue. I keep saying to people about impeachment, it's just any other issue you have. Disapproving of the way that the president has dealt with Syria, whatever the subject is, reluctance, the cowardice to do something about gun violence, or our dreamers, or our transgender people, or the denial about climate crisis. It goes on. Okay, so, that's the election. We don't really care about that, but, we do care about these issues, and we're going to remove him from office, and you're not going to have anything to say about it. I mean, it really is about the issues, and it is about creating a situation where they assassinate President Trump's character if they don't assassinate him physically. They want to try to take his popularity down, and I think a big part of this is we look at the control that they've been allowed to exert over news and over social media. I mean, that is against every aspect of your free speech. The free press is out there because the public has a right to be able to see and hear information that people who spend their time full time looking at the landscape, looking at what is happening. We look at this every day. I spend a great deal of time looking at what's happening and basically doing reconnaissance on the political and the scene as far as personal liberty and that sort of thing. And I bring to you what I think is important. And if you watch this program, you are being informed about what is important. And you have a right to be able to see that and to hear that. That's what they want to take away from you. And they do that by gagging us and telling us that we can't speak, but also gagging you and saying that if you see something or you hear something, you can't talk about that. And if you talk about the wrong issues or say the wrong things about issues that these people believe in, whether it's climate or whether it's their dreamers or their transgenders, they're going to punish you. First, they're going to take you off of social media, and then, like we saw in New York City, they're going to say, if you even use the term illegal alien, then we're going to fine you $250,000. So that's where it ultimately goes. That's why it is ultimately about tyranny. It really is about tyranny. And so as you look at these crowds that are there, a big part of this is trying to undermine President Trump's popularity. If they can control the news that you see, if they can control social media, and then if they can count the votes with Election Guard, and of course DARPA is working, the military-industrial complex, the Pentagon, the Defense Advanced Research Projects people, DARPA, they're working with Microsoft to make sure that they guard the vote counts. And they call that Election Guard. In other words, they're going to be the ones counting the votes. Just like with NewsGuard, they're going to be the ones giving you the news. And if they can monopolize the news, and if they can count the votes, then all they have to do is tell the vast majority of people who support President Trump that, oh, no. You see all this bad news that we put out there, and look at the votes that I've got here. I mean, it just, nobody likes him. Yes, I know you all like him, but nobody else does. Just take a look at the rally. The beta male, Beto O'Rourke, Robert Francis O'Rourke is his real name. Of course, he decided that he would do a counter rally there at Dallas-Fort Worth against President Trump. He knows he's not going to get as many people as President Trump. Trump was going to a 20,000 seat arena. So the beta male decided that he would hold his counter rally at an arena that the theater at Grand Prairie that holds 6,300 people. So, less than a third of what President Trump was going to hold. But it didn't turn out too well for him, as a local reporter, Caroline Vandergriff, who works for the Dallas-Fort Worth CBS station, went there. She said, took pictures and said a handful of O'Rourke supporters are waiting outside the theater at Grand Prairie ahead of his, quote, rally against fear. It's a counter rally to President Trump's event in downtown Dallas. Well, previous to that, she had posted a time-lapse video for people lining up and camping out to get into President Trump's rally for over 20 hours earlier. And she said people are preparing to wait for the next 24 hours. And so she put a time-lapse thing of their people gathering up a full day ahead of time to get into an arena that held more than 3 times as many people as, almost 7 times as many people as Beto O'Rourke had. And, so you've got this situation, and only a handful of people are there at Beto O'Rourke. But if they can continue to come after President Trump, and they can control the news, and they can control, there's some of this time-lapse there, and they can control social media, and they can count the votes, what do you think is going to happen? Now, we're all told that it's absolute chaos in Syria, the Kurds, and yet I began the program showing you the literal war that is taking place in Mexico, the drug war that we created along with the United Nations that's erupted into an actual warfare in Mexico. More people, it's more dangerous now than Syria is, but they don't want to talk about that. They want to use that, they'll ultimately use that to take away more of your freedoms. But the crowd there in Texas was very much behind President Trump when he was talking about bringing the troops home from Syria. The Texas rally crowd chanted, "Bring them home." In response, as President Trump said, American combat troops should not be at the center of ancient sectarian conflicts all over the world. Bring our soldiers back home. And that's when the crowd began chanting, USA and bring them home. Yeah, let's bring them home to the USA. Let's put them on our border, because our border is more vital to defending this country than the border there between Turkey and Syria. And we'll talk more about that when we come back. Stay with us. All right, let's talk about our meddling East policies. Let's not call it the Middle East anymore. What's it in the middle of besides every conflict? Well, it's really us meddling there and muddling it up, isn't it? Our Muddle East policies. An article on Breitbart points out that a senior defense official has said during a background briefing on Tuesday that the Turks were ready to invade Syria before the phone call with President Trump. In the weeks leading up to the Turkish invasion of northern Syria, the U.S. military had detected a variety of warning signs of a pending massive military operation that showed the Turks were planning to invade no matter what the Trump administration told them, said U.S. defense officials. Things that my military colleagues will point out that doesn't look like exercising. It doesn't look like typical garrison behavior. It's preparing for a potential operation. And, of course, that's really what Rand Paul had been saying as well. He said, look, they were coming across the border anyway. The smart thing to do is to make sure that you get the troops out of the way. You got 50 Special Forces troops there, and they're going to be bringing a massive force across the border. It'd be stupid not to move them out of the way. My concern is that that's all that's happening, is that these troops are not going to come home. I hope that they do come home. But we got Mike Pompeo out now saying, well, President Trump tends to change his mind on things. He's very clear. But then as he studies the issue more, in other words, as we propagandize him more, as we lie, cheat, and steal, we have classes on doing that, said Mike Pompeo. He said, when we were in the West Point, they told us you don't lie, cheat, and steal, and we don't tolerate those who do. But when I went to the CIA, we not only did all those things, lied, cheated, and stole, but we also had classes on how to do them. And, of course, I probably includes classes on psychologically manipulating political leaders as well, including your own. And so we see Mitt Romney is now opposing President Trump. Surprise, surprise. Abandoning the Kurds will stand as a blood stain in U.S. history. Oh, really? I mean, arming the Kurds to create a civil war in Syria, arming ISIS to do the same, getting them to fight each other and fight, the Syrians, everybody, fighting everybody. And we, just make a lot of money arming every side, but now you've got Lindsey Graham. Our allies never trust us again. Well, maybe that has something to do with you arming their enemies when you call them your allies at the same time. And you got Mitt Romney out there. This is what he had to say yesterday. He said, the decision to abandon the Kurds violates one of the most sacred duties. Yeah, it's not defending this country anymore, right? It's the Kurds. Everything's about the Kurds. It strikes at American honor. Yeah, not shredding the Constitution. That doesn't reflect on your American honor at all, right, Mitt? What we have done to the Kurds will stand as a bloodstain in the annals of American history. There's a broad strategic implication of our decision as well. Iranian and Russian interests in the Middle East have been advanced by our decision at a time when we're applying maximum pressure on Iran. Well, why are you doing that? By giving them a stronger hand in Syria, we've actually weakened that presence, that pressure. Russia's objective to play a greater role in the Middle East has also been greatly enhanced. The Kurds, out of desperation, have now aligned with Assad. And so he attacked President Trump for speaking cavalierly, even flippantly, even as our ally has suffered death and casualty. Yes, these people who have a strategic plan to overthrow all these governments in the Middle East, but back in 2007, Mitt Romney had something very different to say. At that time, he said Kurdish nationalism could destabilize the border with Turkey. You think? Do you think that when you've got the PKK, an open Marxist, Leninist, separatist Kurdish organization in Turkey, where the Kurds are 20%, the largest ethnic minority in Turkey, and they want to fight for their independence, and they're Marxist-Leninists, and the Turks don't like that? And guess what? Some of the weapons that we're giving to those Syrian Kurds that call themselves a YPG, even though they are also Marxist-Leninists, some of those weapons that Lindsey Graham and Mitt Romney want them to have are finding their way into the PKK Marxist-Leninist allies in Turkey. And that's what Mitt Romney was saying back in 2007. Kurdish nationalism, where you have these Marxist-Leninist ethnic minorities, 15% in Syria, 20% of the population in Turkey, and they want to establish their Marxist-Leninist autonomous state, and they want a violent revolution, and we inject arms into that. Back in 2007, Mitt Romney was right about that. He said at the time, we fight together, pursuing our vital interests. The decision to abandon the Kurds violates our most sacred duty. That's what he's saying now, right? But back in 2007, he said, today, the nation's attention is focused on Iraq. All Americans want U.S. troops to come home as soon as possible. But walking away now or dividing Iran up into parts and walking away later would present grave risks to the U.S. Kurdish nationalism could destabilize the border with Turkey. A regional conflict could ensue. So if you want to stay in Iraq, you get people worried about Kurdish nationalism. If you want to stay in Syria, you get people to say, well, if you don't have Kurdish nationalism, then that's going to be a problem. See, the problem is, the only thing that's consistent about Mitt Romney and Lindsey Graham is that they don't want peace, and they want to stay in the middle of these wars forever, because they have absolutely no regard whatsoever for the interests of America, of American soldiers. They want to waste our money and waste our blood in these wars, because the money is flowing to their military industrial complex sponsors. Meanwhile, Mike Pence has announced Turkey and a ceasefire with Turkey and Syria and the Kurds. So we'll see how that works out. That's good news. Let's hope that that sticks. Meanwhile, in the UK, as that election, they continue to try to overthrow the 2016 election in the UK to say we want to get out of the EU and have national sovereignty. Now, apparently, there is a deal that both Boris Johnson and Juncker are happy about. Nigel Farage had something to say about that. Let's play his clips.
The Berlaymont. This is HQ in Brussels. It's where the European Union is run from. You'll notice a Union Jack. They say we're leaving. Well, we sort of are. Maybe, if Parliament votes for it. Agreement today. Mr. Juncker's happy. Mr. Tusk's happy. Monsieur Barnier's happy. Macron's happy. Merkel's happy. All of which makes me somewhat suspicious. What has Boris achieved? Well, they changed the backstop. The backstop was there as a trap to keep the entire United Kingdom stuck inside the customs union. Boris's great success is that actually they've accepted that the UK is leaving the customs union. That's the upside. That's the good bit. What's the bad bit? The bad bit is that we are signing up to a withdrawal agreement that, rather than having a backstop, puts a regulatory border in between the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland, something that Boris Johnson said no British Prime Minister would ever do. And what about the other 65 million of us? Well, I'll tell you what. Monsieur Barnier.
He's got something very important to say coming up here, but running onto a hard break. We're going to have that last bit of what he has to say when we come back.
And what about the other 65 million of us? Well, I'll tell you what. Monsieur Barnier has been explicit that any future trade agreement means that we will have to surrender our fisheries and, what's more, have regulatory alignment on employment law, environmental law, and taxation. That was the kicker, taxation. So the argument really is this is Brexit in name only if the House of Commons approves it, which, do you know what? I don't think it will.
All right, that's Nigel Farage there. And he was saying that the problem that he sees with this newest Brexit deal is that even though they removed the Irish backstop there, they are still under the EU's labor law, environmental law, and taxation. So again, it's going to be does the phrase taxation without representation mean anything to the British people? You might want to go back to 1776 to see how that turned out. I mean, but they've got a deal that's even worse than what we had with King George. I mean, we had taxation without representation, but they're going to have environmental legislation, which nobody had even dreamed of back then. So that's something that they have to look forward to, as well as labor regulation. And he also said that the fisheries were going to be impacted by the EU's regulations as well. So it's not a clean break by any means. It's not really what the British people voted for. I mean, you don't have sovereignty if they are controlling your labor law, your environmental law, and your taxation. You really don't have any sovereignty. So we'll wait and see what happens with that. We've talked about a lot of international issues as well as surveillance and liberty issues. Let's talk a little bit about life issues and something that they do not want you to see. You've got a trial going on right now with the people, the Center for Medical Progress, that did the undercover investigation of Planned Parenthood and the trafficking in body parts. You all remember this from a couple of years ago. Actually, it was back in 2015. Boy, it's hard to believe it. It's 4 years ago. July of 2015. The person that was supposed to be the star witness for Planned Parenthood, and this is a federal racketeering charge. This is under the RICO Act, Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organizations Act. Planned Parenthood is saying that this was violated. And so this is a federal trial against the pro-life activists. And Deborah Nucatola, who is the former medical director for Planned Parenthood Federation of America. This is the parent organization of the people who don't want there to be any parents, quite frankly, the national organization. And she was supposed to be their star witness. She was the subject of the very first video that came out from the Center for Medical Progress. She was shown munching salad, sipping wine, while dispassionately discussing in graphic detail the ways that she altered second trimester abortion procedures, according to Operation Rescue, who was there. They're one of the defendants. And by the way, Randall Terry is no longer any way affiliated with them. Actually, we're going to talk to some of these people coming up next week. We're going to have them on as guests to tell us what's going on with this. But she talked in graphic detail about what they did in second trimester abortion procedures to ensure that organs were intact so they could sell them. And again, she was going to be their star witness. A source inside the courtroom told this reporter for Operation Rescue that she had been conducting an average of 200 abortions per month for her entire 21-year career as an abortionist. That means so far, if that's correct, that she would be responsible for the deaths of over 50,000 babies. She told the court, reportedly, I provide abortions to 24 weeks and beyond if needed. 24 weeks and beyond. So what does that really mean to you? Does it really have any meaning to you? As a matter of fact, I tweeted this out when I went to visit Focus on the Family's visitor center. I was on vacation in Colorado Springs. They had, I took a picture of it. Pull that picture up, Travis. I had my wife put her hand there so you can get a perspective. They had babies at different ages. They would show the size of the baby at different points. Can you pull that picture up? And I want you to see just how large we're talking about here, a baby at 24 weeks and beyond. Well, maybe we'll get that picture later. I guess we don't have somebody there to do that. She went ahead and said that she likes to use the term, instead of selling baby parts for a profit, she likes to talk about tissue donations. And then while she was on the stand, she sobbed about the fact that she and her family were damaged by the release of these videos. The problem is that on cross-examination, the other attorney brought up statements that she had made under oath during an earlier deposition. At that point in time, she said the release of the videos were, quote, no big deal, and that they, quote, did not damage me, unquote. She had also made sworn statements such as, I did nothing wrong, I don't care if these videos are released, there's nothing wrong with what I said. But then, when she testified this week, she was crying on the stand, talking about how damaged she was and how damaged her family was with that. Now, the judge who's presiding over this, Judge William Orrick, did something that people really didn't expect him to do. This is a judge who was appointed by Barack Obama. Not only that, but he was on the board of a community organization that negotiated a no-fee lease for Planned Parenthood and the community center that he helped to run. So he's got deep ties with the community center. Okay, you guys got that picture now? Can you click on one of those and pull that up? Is that possible for you to do that? There we go. All right. Not that one, the other one. The other one that shows 24 weeks and beyond. There you go. Zoom in on that a little bit if you can. Anyway, you can see that biggest baby there, if I'm correct, I can read that label there. The biggest baby that you see there is, the second biggest baby is where, she has absolutely no problem doing abortions to babies of that size. And then up to beyond, she said. So that would include the other baby there as well, nearly full term. You can take a look at that and just ask yourself if that's infanticide. It's very clear to me that it is. But it's not very clear to this judge whether or not he has any conflict of interest. So even though he's negotiating a no-fee lease for Planned Parenthood in a community center that he runs, when they asked him to recuse himself because of a conflict of interest, obviously he's deeply into this, and so is his wife. She's got a social media history that shows that that she likes and supports incredibly radical abortion rights, right to abortion through all 9 months, also saying that supporting groups that mandate that everybody has to cover abortion through insurance for the full 9 months, as well as if you don't provide insurance for abortion, then you'll be penalized severely. So they're very heavy into this. He was appointed by Barack Obama, and he has been a big fundraiser for Barack Obama as well. It's probably one of the reasons why he got appointed as a judge. He raised at least, bundled together at least $200,000 for Obama. So it's no surprise that he would deny any request to show the video. However, this week he actually allowed the playing of 5 minutes of raw, uncut video from that meeting that was part of the video. And it was the first time during the 3-week trial that any of the jury had seen any of the video. I'll give you their reactions when we return. But just think about that. You know, as President Trump says, this is absolutely amazing. I can't see the evidence and I can't confront my hearing. Well, that seems President Trump to be the case in virtually every case that I have any information about. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I was talking about how things did a complete 180 for Planned Parenthood in this trial this last week as they're coming after the Center for Medical Progress. The judge there, an Obama appointee who has ties to Planned Parenthood, of course, refused to recuse himself for a conflict of interest. He has suppressed videos, the actual videos, which are the central part of the issue here, right? It's kind of what we see happening with President Trump. And President Trump, as I've said all along, yes, it is outrageous that they're doing this to you, that they're having secret testimony, that they've got a parade of witnesses that you're not allowed to see. We're not allowed to see what they're doing. And, trying to run an impeachment process like that. But that is par for the course. That's the way the Department of Justice and these judges operate in trial after trial that I've covered. That is normal operating procedure. So here you have these people. They're being tried for RICO violations, racketeering group. And yet, the videos in question, the jury is not allowed to see. That is the central issue. So why aren't they allowed to actually look at what was filmed? This was an undercover investigation. Of course, the government does undercover investigations all the time. Why can't that be seen? Nevertheless, the judge allowed this video to be put up, and you had the subject of the first video, an executive of Planned Parenthood, weeping on the stand, talking about how her life and her family had been damaged, and then immediately they came back and said, yeah, but you previously said under oath that it was no big deal, that it did not damage you, that there was nothing wrong with what I said. I did nothing wrong. I don't care if these videos are released. And then, that was then. Now, under oath, she says something completely different and weeps on stage. So that was a big deal. And then the judge allowed the video to be shown. And it was the first time for the whole 3 weeks that this trial's been going on, the first time the jury was allowed to see one of those videos. Now, these videos have been put up. And if you put them up on social media, they'll take them down. YouTube has taken the videos down and purged those videos. You're not allowed to see that. See, in the court of public opinion, you're not allowed to see the facts, just like the people in this trial. You're not allowed to see the facts, right? Can't have people making their own decisions based on reality. No, we've got to control the narrative, and they pretty much do control it, whether it's an Obama judge or whether it's Google censoring videos or whether it's social media censoring videos. So when the jury saw this, some of them were crying as she was speaking on video about liver, lungs, hearts, muscle, and baby heads that were being harvested from the bodies of aborted babies. And so not only did she perjure herself, but after that video was finally shown, it really turned things around. Hopefully, they will pay attention to what is actually happening there. The trafficking, the murder of babies, and the trafficking of their body parts. And it's a big business. It's a big business for adults as well. Just pointed out last week how murder trials, potential murders have not been investigated because people are so eager to traffic in the body parts that they start chopping them up and selling the parts off before the police can come around and start to do an investigation. It's very, very profitable. That's why Planned Parenthood is doing it. Another video that was only briefly available online before it was censored by YouTube, by Google, was also talking about some of the comments that were made by not only by her, but also by other executives of Planned Parenthood. Susan Robinson of Planned Parenthood in San Jose, California, had said, for example, the fetus is a tough little object. And taking it apart, I mean, taking it apart on day one is very difficult. So you can imagine how difficult the job is for these Planned Parenthood people when they want to take apart a baby that's 24 weeks or full term apart. Yeah, it's pretty hard for them to tear that kid up and to preserve the parts for their financial purposes, right? Again, the same woman, Deborah Nucatola, had said, sometimes she'll tell me she wants a brain, and we'll know, leave the calvarium in until the last and then try to basically take it or actually, catch everything. And then even keep it separate from the rest of the tissue so it doesn't get lost. She was the first video out. One of the founders of the Consortium of Abortion Providers for Planned Parenthood was shown on the video that's now been removed by YouTube, of course. It was only up briefly until YouTube censored it. An eyeball just fell into my lap, and that's gross. Her comment was followed by raucous laughter from all the abortionists at the meeting of the National Abortion Federation. See, these are the things that they don't want you to see. And the stuff that they don't want you to see is what we focus on. That's why they don't want you to see us. Folks, if you want to keep us here, what supports this program and everything that we do are the products that we sell at InfoWarsStore.com. We've got massive sales right now. We've got preparedness products. We have natural supplements, safe, effective, and right now discounted 40 to 70% off. We've got many products across the board at InfoWarsStore.com, plus free shipping and double Patriot points. We got things like Brain Force Plus, 50% off. We have Knockout, our all-natural sleep aid, 50% off. Bod Ease and the Super Blue toothpaste that has nano silver. Bod Ease is our all-natural anti-inflammatory product. All those 50% off. BioTrue Selenium. Selenium is necessary for good health. We have the very best quality selenium that you're going to find, non-GMO, organic, 50% off. We've got Survival Shield X3 Nascent Iodine, 70% off. And again, all with free shipping, double Patriot points. Take a look at InfoWarsStore.com. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about, we got just about 4 minutes left. I want to talk about what's going on in Poland and how that kind of reflects on what we're not doing here. There's a big fight going on about with the LGBT community pushing back against legislators who said, look, it's gotten so crazy, we're just not going to let these teachers promote sexual activity to minors. We're going to consider that to be a crime. And so they're all freaking out saying, if you teach sex education in Poland, you could go to prison. Well, show a picture of, show that picture right there. Pull that up and zoom in on that. And I'll describe this to the people who are listening to a podcast or to radio. And you've got a couple of guys there in G-strings, fortunately with their, or unfortunately, with their backs to the camera there. Show that picture. They've got, one of these individuals got a mohawk and a very hairy back. They're kind of flabby. The other guy's trussed up in some kind of a bondage outfit. And there's a sign there that says in Polish, "Is this love?" As they're showing that there, okay? And that's the question. Is that love? It's amazing to me that, you've got these people, the LGBT people, as well as the government, they don't know what sex is. To them, it's an act. Everything boils down to a sex act of some sort. They don't see the love in it, right? And so when you look at that picture there, the question is this love? Is this what this is about, really? Is this what you're going to do to my kids? Because regardless of what adults do, why are we allowing this kind of gender gaslighting to be pushed onto kids? Why are we allowing this in the United States? Maybe we ought to go back and revisit this whole thing about sex education in our country. I remember, as I've said many times, going back to the 90s, the father who was arrested because he didn't want his 8-year-old taught about straight up heterosexual sex. So, that's not really the way that I want it. I don't want it as an act. I want to put this in the proper context of love and relationships and marriage. They've changed marriage now. Now we have Supreme Court definition of marriage, which is different from the way marriage has been defined by every culture throughout millennia. And so these people are finally pushing back. We said, well, no, we're going to let kids, because we're afraid that they may get pregnant if they experiment on their own, so we're going to let the teachers teach this. And now look at where we are with the LGBT issues. And look at how defiant they are and what they want to stop. They talked about how they wanted to get rid of tax deductions for all churches, and Franklin Graham came back and said, I'm not going to worship the LGBT religion. And he's right, it is a religion, but I think he's wrong to focus on the tax deduction. Folks, it's not about getting free money from the government. Of course, the Democrats do that as well. Anything they like, they heavily subsidize. The reason that there's tax deduction for churches is because we realized that was something that was important for society, for having an orderly society, for having even a tolerant society. The Democrats, on the other hand, they want to tax anything that they want to destroy. And that's the bottom line. They want to destroy the churches in that way as well.